Hey, my name is Byron Summerall. I'm with Ackland Avenue, and I'm joined here with two of my friends, Juan Jose and Renee. They are both developers on our team, and I was hoping to get a few like QA types, designer types on this call too, just to get some different perspectives. And if that's you, if you are a designer, hey Dante just joined. So if that's you, then or if you just have questions, I encourage you to use this Hangout app and click the link that actually allows you to submit questions, and you can submit those questions anytime during this call, and we will gladly answer those as soon as we can. As soon as we see your question on our little panel here, and then we'll also try to weave it into our discussion. So why talk about environments? Seems kind of like a bit of a mundane topic. Well, I was inspired the other day because one of our product owners, Deanna, was asking me a lot of questions about environments that I had maybe just taken for granted. And we developers, we throw around terms a lot, and we talk about the local this or the dev this. And maybe we're just kind of forgetting to bring everyone else along with us, and maybe it's possible that even some developers don't always understand exactly what we're talking about. We're just kind of spitting things out that we've heard other people say. So another one of my friends, Dennis, just joined, and Dennis is a QA tester, but he's also got a lot of engineering background as well. So he'll be able to add some more to this call. So what I thought I'd do is just kind of start off with why talk about this. I already mentioned Deanna to you, but I really would like for everyone to be able to have a clear understanding of what environments we're working with and things that the developer just kind of throw around like local or staging or cloud. It would be good for everybody on a software development team to have a clear understanding of what those things are and how they affect us. Also, I wanted to talk about just a few of the different types of apps, a few different types of deployments that we might have in our company, and this might actually cover all software development in general. But well, actually, I can think of a couple right now that it won't cover, but I'll mention them anyway, just so that it does cover them. So we've got mobile apps. Our company does mobile apps. If you're developing software these days, you probably are developing mobile apps at some point. Also, web apps. That's very, very popular in our world right now. Everybody is thinking in terms of web and how to get them connected to the internet. We're also talking about desktop apps. And in our case, particularly, we are developing and deploying desktop apps that will be used worldwide on computers all over the place, and we still want them to be very connected to the internet. And then we have these things called APIs. Let me see if I can dissect that. Does anybody remember what API stands for?
It's
I want to
not
say
access program
advanced
interface.
programmer. What is it?
Access program interface.
I think
The API.
the A is the one that's giving me a problem. I want to say that it's advanced
Application. Application.
application programming interface. Yeah. Okay. Good job. Good job. You can tell I'm really prepared for this one. So yeah, those are some of the different types of applications that we develop. Also, outside of that, and something that I really enjoy developing is not so much like desktop apps where they have a UI, but I also enjoy developing command line tools. It's a lot of fun. It doesn't seem like it'd be a lot of fun to my 8-year-old son, who there's nothing flashing, but it actually does something, so it's fun to me. And then also there are things like developing for Raspberry Pi or Arduino, where you're developing software that maybe makes something actually physically happen. That's also pretty cool. So all of those are affected by environments, and whether to different extents. So in this call, we're probably going to focus on the software that Ackland Avenue produces more than the other types of software. So that's mostly mobile, web, desktop, and API. Um, so let's talk really briefly about the environments that we come into contact with every day, and try to put some meat onto those bones. So the four environments that I thought of are local, dev or development, staging, and production. So who wants to describe dev or development? What's the what's the purpose of or the use of the development server?
Integrate the code of the developers and ensure the quality with automatic tests.
All right. So you mentioned a couple of things. So integrating the code from the developers, and then also ensuring quality. What else is there going on with the dev server?
I think the first phrase that I come to my mind is that remove the concept of it's just work in my local or in my local work fine.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I
So
should have mentioned local first, but yeah, you're
yeah,
right. Yeah, again, it gets
but
rid of the excuses.
yeah, but normally how we use develop is for the QAs, so they can test all the features and then can evaluate if the feature is right or have some issues or bugs. So
Right.
it's like to prevent any bugs uh, to others environments. It's like a filter.
Yeah. Kind of like a pre-staging area.
Yeah, like the development environment allow bugs, but staging and production should not.
Right. Right. So the dev environment, I really liked. I like how you all have said all of those things. Dante tends to have the very technical definition. He's like a walking dictionary sometimes. I love how he puts things. He said integrating. It's where we integrate. So all these different developers. Maybe you've got like 10 different developers on a project, all contributing code in some way. So this thing that I'm pointing to in the middle of this is a dev server. So we are constantly all day merging or pushing our code into this middle thing that's the dev environment. And yeah, that's basically what we're doing is we're integrating everything. So this guy over here is working on product creation. This guy is deleting the product. This guy is modifying the product. This guy is moving the product to another category. This guy is adding an image to the product. And when you put it all together, you're integrating it into one place. So that is an excellent way to describe that, and that's the development environment. We typically will have a development environment on a server that's common to everyone on the project. So if you got 10 people working on the project, those 10 people need to have some sort of access to that development environment. So so that's why it's typical to have a cloud-based dev server. What do I mean by cloud-based? Let's put it into terms for non-developers. Anybody want to take a stab? Dennis,
It's a
go.
virtual server. It's a
Yeah.
virtual server on the
Where
internet
is it located?
in a data center. Could be China, Russia, United States. It's on the internet. The
Texas.
cloud is a virtual server running our software application or software server, and we use it to test it, the software, because we don't want to have a data center to test all the applications, and the costs of the cloud servers are pennies,
Right. Right.
considering mounting a data center, a
Right.
physical data center.
Right. We typically will use the when we use Amazon AWS, we'll actually use servers. I think they're located in Texas. I always tell people it's Texas because Texas is a big place. but yeah, there's like some sort of glass-walled or really beautiful building that's like 50 stories tall somewhere in Dallas, Texas, or something like that, and one of the floors on that building is just full of blinking lights and fans and servers and really geeky people walking around monitoring things, and each little blinking light probably represents a server, or maybe even 20 servers, and that's kind of those are the details that maybe make your head hurt, but that's the reality of it. We're basically, we don't have servers. I don't have servers in my office here. It's just us people, and I'm actually in Honduras right now, so we're developing against servers that are in some other country. It doesn't matter. It doesn't bother us at all, except that when the internet goes down, then we're bothered. So, and we'll talk about performance here in just a few minutes. But Renee, you mentioned removing the excuse of works on my machine, which gives me a good segue into the idea of local. So Renee, why don't you tell us about the local environment? Renee.
I didn't hear the question. I have a lack of internet. Can you repeat again?
Okay, yeah. The internet is going slow at your house now.
Yep.
So tell us about the local environment.
Okay. Normally, that's depend of the project we are working on, right? So we need to configure. In this case, we choose a boilerplate, and in this case, we have multiple boilerplates, like for backends or front end. So that's something that we need to configure, like install some plugins. Maybe we need to use Node as the backend, so we need to install those packages in our machine. Maybe we need a database, so we need to install a database in our machine. But that's is just for my local computer. So to set up my local environment. So maybe that environment is where I need to set up all the stuff from zero to make it the app running, but just in my machine, not in Byron machine, because Byron need to do the same thing in their machine. So each developer or each person who want to run the app need to configure that from zero.
Juan Jose, in 2 words or less, can you describe your environment?
Local environment.
Uh-huh.
You mean? Well, I have more than 2 words. It's just the developer sandbox. You have that so you don't mess up the others' works. So that's the purpose of the local environment. The developer is free to do whatever he wants in his local environment because he's sure that he cannot destroy the other ones. So that's why we have local environments.
I'm going to show you and our viewers my local environment. Right there it is. It's a laptop. So just for the layman, the non-developer out there, what is a local environment? It's a server or a computer that you can actually just touch with your hands. You can it's right here with you. It's local. So if you've got 10 developers, or you could even say 10 people, including developers, designers, testers, every single person, if you've got 10 people, how many local environments do you have?
10.
10, right. The reason why I think this is important is because maybe to some people they think that when you're developing, you have I don't know, maybe a computer here, but you're accessing some other server and you're actually developing against the other server. I used to do that. It's a horrible experience having to develop against in a developer sandbox in another country or another server somewhere. So typically, and especially on our team, the local environment is a computer that is actually sitting on your desk. And Renee was mentioning like setting up the boilerplates and setting up the development environment and downloading things and things like that. But in the end, it's just your computer.
Byron,
Yeah, go ahead.
I would like to add something to that. Not necessarily you will have a local environment. For example, the QAs does not have a local environment, so maybe they will have a computer to test, but they will not have a local environment when they are seeing the app.
Yeah, I
So
think you're right. From a
it's just to
developer
clarify.
perspective, that's true.
Yeah. So right now, just the developer, as I understand, just the developer have a local environment. But the QA saw the dev environment or stage. I'm not sure if they are testing production, but they don't have local environment, and I'm not sure if they should have at some point. But right now, just is for that.
Okay. Yeah, good. So we mentioned development, or the dev environment, is usually in the cloud. So does anybody want to take a stab at this? Is where we start getting into an area where maybe everyone doesn't have a clear idea of some of these things. But staging. Staging is something that we talk about in our company quite a bit. It's not something that we invented at all. It's something that is actually used in many agile teams. So what is the purpose of staging? And I'll go ahead and give part of the answer away. It is for us at least, it is also a cloud server. So Dev is a cloud server in Dallas, Texas, in that glass building, and then staging is also a server in Texas or wherever. So what's the purpose of staging?
Staging is the release environment. So it's pre-production. You're having a staging everything that you want to deploy to production next, and it's important to have staging and development in different places because sometimes you want to plan for a release to production, but you don't want to stop development. So that's when you say like, okay, we have this in the staging, we're gonna test it and see if everything is okay. But we want developers to still be working. So all their changes go to development. That's the environment that keeps changing every day. And we have the staging environment or release environment to prepare for what we're going to deploy to production. So we have more time to see if this is really going to work.
Yeah. Another way staging is used is the way the client can see what we have, or the product manager show what we have to the client. So, or the client can do some tests in that environment. So we can show to the client the dev environment because maybe dev environment have a lot of issues. But what we show to them is the staging normally.
Right. Cool. So here's a quiz. When do we deploy to staging? And when I say deploy to staging, what I mean is take whatever we have in dev at that moment in time and actually move it, copy it over to the staging environment. So when do we do that?
At the end of each sprint.
Ideally.
Once we, yeah, no, when we are clear that there is enough stuff to that we can show to the client, maybe, or there are functionality stuff that works in the right way.
Right. Yeah, I think that ideally, at the end of a sprint, we're we are trying to do Scrum. So even if your team is not Scrum and you're trying to do Agile, then you still want to have fast releases and often releasing often and rapidly. So we try to release. We're really striving for this. We want to release once a sprint. So at the end of the sprint, we want to release. And because most clients are not progressive enough or crazy enough maybe to actually release to production just at the flip of a switch, GitHub does this. They release to production daily and maybe even multiple times a day. And that is the definition or the essence of flying by the seat of your pants. I think it's awesome. I would love to get to that point with our clients, but most of our clients are not ready to be able to be deploying to production that fast, not even daily. So the most that we're able to get from our clients most of the time is to release once every 2 weeks, and maybe not even that, because a lot of times it's hard for us to kind of get out of this idea of, well, my product is this 6-month thing. What we'd really like to get to is, yes, we have a 6-month window of development, but we're gonna deploy every 2 weeks something to production. We're doing this with one project right now, and it's just, I think it's amazing. It's a great experience. But the idea is, the whole reason why we need staging is because we want to take what we have and develop it at some certain point in time that we think is pretty bug-free, or at least it represents the amount of features that we want to be in that release. We move those over to staging, and then QA starts testing staging to make sure that staging is where it needs to be, no bugs. And when we think it's ready, and the client thinks it's ready, then we could, at any moment, pull the trigger and move staging over to production. That's the whole reason for staging. It's pre-production. Just like I mentioned that dev is like pre-staging, where it's changing all the time. Staging is pre-production. So who wants to just, this one's, they call this candy on the bottom shelf or low-hanging fruit. Who wants to talk about production environment?
In some projects, I have seen the pre-production environment should be a copy of the production environment in terms of CPU size, memory, etc. And that, if pre-production is built in this way, this is used to perform tests, several tests to a production to a environment like production. Tests like performance that are very difficult to spot and to understand on another environments.
Yeah, you're onto something, and I definitely forgot to mention that staging should be pretty close to, or should be the same configuration as production. I think my voice is now leaving me. So if, for instance, if your production environment has a load balancer and three API servers, 2 database servers with sharding, then you should have that kind of situation in your staging environment. 1 load balancer, 3 API servers, and 2 databases with sharding, so that you can prove that your application works and works well and will work in the production environment. So Dante, would you take us a little bit farther and tell us more about the production environment and its purpose?
The production environment is the real thing. It's the real product working in a real environment with real users. It's the final product.
Right.
No test should be done.
Yeah, no more testing.
No more testing. For that is the pre-production environment.
Yeah.
If a bug appears on the production environment, the bug should be tested on the pre-production environment and go down on the chain of the environments.
Right. And also, just to take that a step further, if we find a bug in production, then we want to fix it, like you said, fix it in staging or pre-production, but then we want to take that fix and not only apply it up to production, but then down to develop. And we want to propagate that fix in all the different environments.
Yeah. That is
Um,
called a hotfix, right?
those are called hot fixes. Yeah, because you're like your fingers are burning as you're typing. No, it's because you're in the heat of the moment. You're pushing something out to production, and you're pushing something the same thing down to the other levels.
I would like to add that the production environment not necessarily is a cloud-based,
That
because some
actually leads me
clients,
into another the next section. Go ahead and finish what you were going to say.
yeah, the thing is that not all the clients use some services like Amazon or Azure websites or whatever other service they would like to have to host their apps. So maybe they already have some servers in Linux or Windows. So we need to configure all of that in their servers also, or
Right.
they can configure for us if they don't want to share the credential or something like that.
Right. Yeah, or if they want to maintain control, high control, or if they've got some sort of compliance issues that, if it's a healthcare company and they've got to make sure that they are HIPAA compliant, and they want to maintain control over something in the server, then yeah, that might be the case. I forgot, or I've been leaving out one really important thing, and I wanna just throw it out there and let somebody else talk about it. What about mobile? We've got local dev, staging, and production. What about mobile?
Well, regarding production, mobile is Apple in the App Store and Play Store, right? That's production environment.
Mm,
So
Well, in mobile, we sometimes have builds instead of environments. Like this is build number X X10. This is something that we are still developing. So that's our development environment.
I think
Because
depend if you use some service inside of the
depends
app.
on the type of the application too. Because sometimes, let's say you are making a game. Sometimes games are not web-based or cloud-based. Sometimes they're just you install it, you play it. Development is something ready to be released, or is the actual game in production that everybody can download and play. I wanted to add something that I don't agree very much with about how often should the staging be deployed, and I think it has to do with what we're talking right now, mobile. So you said 2 weeks ideally, um, and that's fine. But I think we're losing some insight on the reason why we say 2 weeks. And for me, staging should be deployable whenever you're ready to make a release. You got a feature done, and you say, okay, this is ready to go to production. We can deploy this to staging, so we can test it and make sure that we can deploy it to production. If you are able to create a deployable feature in 2 weeks or every 2 weeks, then yeah, you deploy to staging every 2 weeks because you're ready to deploy. But you shouldn't be deploying things that are halfway through to staging.
right.
That's very important because that's the reason we have staging. That's a release.
Right.
Uh, Everything in release or staging should be functional. So that's one of the reasons we do Scrum, because we want to have functional software every 2 weeks. That's the reason we say we want to deploy to staging every 2 weeks.
Right.
And I think Juan Jose have right when he say that all the features that were deployed or were developed during those 2 weeks are merged into staging, right, or production. Uh, because the other way to merge the staging is by feature and not by with all the development branch like we do.
Yeah,
So there are
which is
multiple ways.
merging by or deploying features is a
It's more,
golden goose.
yeah.
It's possible. There are ways to do it, but it's something that we have never actually mastered. We
It's
tried
very
it at
challenging.
IVL.
It's very challenging.
Yeah. One thing I've been speaking with some friends in California about this, and I've known about the concept of feature toggles for years, but I've never been able to really implement it in a winning way. And there's a company. Some of my colleagues are in that company, and they're using feature toggles to be able to deploy feature at a time. It's a really cool concept. It kind of gets out of the scope of this call a little bit, but I wanted to say that I really agree with Juan Jose. It would be amazing to be able to deploy just whenever it's necessary to staging, whenever it's the right time. So maybe 2 weeks is not the right time. That might come down to what you're putting into your sprint, because if you're planning at the beginning of a sprint to do only half of a feature, it should be the better half, or it should be some sort of like smart, intelligent way to actually develop that half of the feature so that it still brings value. Because the whole purpose is not just to develop, not to write code and push that code somewhere at the end of the sprint and say, okay, I'm done. The whole point of a sprint is to squeeze value out of the code and actually let it do something real. And another thing is that we don't want to just push anything we want, anything at all, to staging. When we're pushing something into staging, we're saying this is done. This is ready. So even if we're talking about a portion of a feature that we think is ready for production, that's what we're saying. It's ready for production. So staging is not some sort of like it's not like a sandbox where we can just put anything. Staging is, this is it. This is real.
Yeah. Yeah. So the important thing is that uh, we have to stop thinking of staging like just a repo where we push things every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a release. It should have all the release and it should be functional. For your comments, if you cannot complete a feature in 2 weeks, then I would say that you would be advisable to not deploy to staging until you're sure that, okay, we're done, we can deploy this. We deploy and we continue development later.
Right.
But it's a bad thing to deploy half the work because that's
Unless
not the
it's a really
purpose
good
of
half.
staging.
If it's like a really good half, like if it's the half that you can actually use and get real value out of.
That's right. If you can use that half, then yeah, that's okay. Yeah. So
Renee?
Yeah, I can say that that depends of what project we are working on, because maybe we are working in an existing project that the client have, but maybe we are building a project from scratch, right? An app from scratch. And my opinion about that is that staging when we are building an app from scratch maybe it's not necessary, because for me, staging should be production, because we need to test how it's configured and all the features. For me, staging is more like once the app is already in production, we need to have a pre-production.
Right. And agile purists, which I would love to become one, I would love to be one, would say, well, at the end of sprint 1, you should have released to production, so that sprint 2, you have a pre-release or a pre-production staging environment that you really need, because at the end of the sprint too, you want to get it into that staging environment so that you can move it off into production sometime, hopefully very soon after sprint 2, because if you read much about Scrum, Scrum is really, really big, and Kanban is even this way too, but Scrum is really big on delivering something of real value at the end of every sprint. Not just something that's, that we've, not just a few things that we've been able to finish, knowing that we're going to really finish the whole project in 6 months. The idea is more of, yes, there are 6 months of work, but let's find 2 weeks worth of work, 2 or 3 weeks worth of work that we can turn into something really valuable and deploy that. And then keep on working on the next thing, deploy that. Or deploy something and then wait a week, do nothing for a week, as far as like no actual production development work, for a week, and wait and watch the users and see how they're reacting to what you just put into production. And this button over here that you thought was going to be really, really awesome, and you've got plans to develop that next, you find out based on user statistics that they've never touched that button. What they're doing is this over here. This is what they really find interesting. And so then, after that week of pause, of learning, you can actually reconfigure your next sprint, replan your next sprint, and focus on this thing over here that the users actually cared about. Or you can say, okay, designer, nobody knew about this button. They couldn't see it. Or they weren't interested in this because they don't understand it. So we need to change that before we start to go down the road too far. That's getting kind of off of the environment's road a little bit. But that's, to me, we should be deploying to production every single time that we can. The whole idea of a sprint is to finish with something really usable, really valuable. Yes, we can get derailed. Yes, we can get behind. Yes, things can become can be half done. That's one of the reasons why we want to notice that stuff as fast as possible, so that we can reconfigure, so that we can regroup our dev team and say, okay, we're not going to work on that one anymore. We're not going to be able to finish it, so let's just not work on that anymore. Let's just focus on these other things and develop some real value. And then that way it can at the end of the sprint, ideally, it could move in to staging, and then from there move into production.
But that's just for web apps, because for mobile apps, I think like Juan Jose say, is just per build, because one thing is the mobile app and the other thing is the backend API we are using to connect to that mobile app.
Right.
So the API should have multiple environments, like dev, local dev, staging, and production. But the mobile app is just the mobile app. And sometimes it also we did a WPF app. I remember we did Dante build one, and we were confused about staging because we were doing the same thing, and then we start thinking in our dev is staging, and also is production. It's just the APA that change.
For web apps, I think the same concept applies. It's just how the environment is stored. For web apps, you have a web-based environment. For a mobile app, you have development builds, staging builds, and the production build. So this is the same concept, just in a different way, probably. I don't know.
I agree. The concept stays. The concept should be true in all of these different environment or these different deployment different deployments. What's the word? Scenarios. So we've got local, we've got mobile, we've got cloud, we've got on-site, we've got APIs, we've got desktop apps, we've got all these different types of software, and we still want to be able to move them through these different stages. We're always going to have a local environment, no matter what you've got. Then you're always going to have a dev environment, or you could say build. Now, we might want to define the word build, the way we're using it, because that for a non-developer, maybe that's one of those strange words that is not super obvious. So to me, a build is very similar to a zip file. So when you download the version, or actually a version is another way to put it, but when you download version 1.3, you've downloaded a build of that software. And you're able to download it, install it on your computer, and use it. And even though you're using it on your local machine, you're still using a build that is the certain version, and it's probably a production version of your software. I don't know if I'm getting way too confusing there, but some of this stuff is kind of lofty. The idea is, though, we do have these different concepts in every single type of software. So even a mobile app, we should have a way to build that is dev, something that's constantly changing. A way to build that is staging, something that we can test for pre-release. And then a way to build that is production. That's the thing that we send into the Google Store or the Apple Store. Same thing for desktop apps. So we're working on at least one desktop app right now. That desktop app should have, and it does, it should have a dev build, and then it should have a staging build that we can test for production, and then it should have a production build. And all of those things, the water gets kind of muddy when we are using apps that are connected to an API. So even with our web apps, we're developing a front end and we're developing an API. This is typical for us. So we have a web front end, or a mobile front end, or a desktop front end, and they're connected to an API. The API has a dev, staging, and production environment. The mobile app has a dev, staging, and production environment. They've all got these environments because the reason for them stays no matter what type of app we're working on. There's always going to be dev. Because you can't do it without dev. And we could do it without staging, but we shouldn't. So we should have staging, and production. You almost can't do it without production. So what I'm trying to say is kind of basically what Juan Jose was also saying. We always have, or should always have, these different types of builds, or types of versions, or types of environments. Depending on the software we're building, it might look a little different or feel a little different, but we've still got the concepts.
That concept is applicable even to non-software things. Let's say, for example, you're developing something like this. Use a PS4 controller.
Sure.
In development, you have a blueprint of what the specification of these are. Then development of software could be the code. So you have your blueprint. You put the blueprint in a magic machine and gives you this. So in development, QA is going to test every new feature that people is working on. On a staging, when you have a stable version, you separate that blueprint and say, okay, this is stable and this is testable by I don't know, the client. So you create a new instance, we can say, of that blueprint, and the client's going to test this. Development can still work on the new prototype and stuff. And when you're sure that that's going to go to the stores, then you take another blueprint and say, okay, this is the final version. And that's your production environment. That's going to be sold in the stores, and everybody's going to use that. So even for non-software project, having development, staging, and production can be applicable. The same concept, just different ways to do it.
Yeah, I like your way of describing that. So we got a few more minutes left. Any other thoughts just about what we've talked about?
I just want to make emphasis on the importance of knowing why are we trying to or why are we aiming to deploy every 2 weeks, because we shouldn't lose our insight on why are we doing that. And that is because we want to deploy something that brings value, that is functional, that can be usable every 2 weeks. That's the whole purpose of this. And we shouldn't be thinking of, okay, we need to deploy every 2 weeks because we need to deploy every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We need to make something usable every 2 weeks. And because we can make something usable every 2 weeks, we can deploy every 2 weeks. So I just want to make some emphasis on that.
That's good. Yeah, we definitely don't want to get into the trap of just doing things because that's what we always do. That's a dangerous trap. What we want to do is, well, unless that thing that we always want to do, is developing or delivering real value. So if that's our habit, which I certainly hope that any development team can say that they're working toward that habit. But if that's our habit, then yeah, we should always just do that. So let's talk about performance. This is actually something that Deanna was really interested in when she was talking to me about this. So what are some things that affect the performance of any environment?
I would like to add something about that, Byron. Since the performance will depend of if it's cloud-based or if the server are inside of the company of the client, or maybe some techniques that the developer use to do some stuff. The performance dependent it could be for many reasons. But what I can think right now is, for example, our development environment. If it's Node.js, we use normally Amazon Web Service or Heroku, right? And there is not enough memory right there, so maybe some QAs could see that there's a little bit slow. If it's .NET, we use App Harbor. For a staging environment, we are using the same for now. For some projects, other projects are hosted in their client machines, and maybe for dev environment, the performance is slower than production. So that's regarding the cloud. But as I say, there's a lot of reasons why the performance could be slow or. Go ahead.
Some things that comes to my mind when talking about performance, it's one, the size of the data, two, the traffic that the different environments have. About the size of the data, it has happened to me that you write a query and it works perfectly on your local environment. It works very well on dev, works as expected on staging, and when it hits production, it doesn't work very well. And sometimes because when you tested that, you had, I don't know, say 100 records in your database in that table. But production has 10 million records, and that blows up. So you have to be very aware of how is the size of the data there, so that you don't make those mistakes, because sometimes that's very crucial. And also the traffic. Sometimes you have a lot of users, and that can really affect the performance. When you're testing something on your local, you're the only one using it, and development only the QAs. So those are two things that comes to my mind when talking about performance.
Dante, go. Oh,
You're muted.
Dante, your mic is not working.
Yeah.
That's why, that's why Dante
Yeah, we
didn't talk too
probably
much.
yeah. We've been wondering why you were so quiet. Well, he'll pop back on here in a second. Maybe he'll tell us what he was wanting to say. But I wanted to just reiterate something that both of you guys have said. And
Hello.
there we go. Hey, never mind. I
Hey.
won't reiterate. I'll let Dante talk.
We have two sides about when we talk about the performance, the backend and the front end. On the backend side, the most important part is the database, because we need to be aware, like Juan Jose said, that we need to understand the queries on the database that we are performing. We need to be aware about the index. The index is stuff of from the database they need constant monitor, because the index is something that progress with the data. One day the index the developer designed is valid, but the another day will be invalid, because the data has progressed, has different performance, etc. The database is a bottleneck when we talk about the performance in the backend. There is a lot of several technologies that allow you to perform a better understanding of this, like monitors for a specific database, and another database like database in memory, on cache, etc. When we talk about the front end, the things are different, because we are dealing with network performance issue, and the size of the data that we are returning from the backend is an important thing, because the way we work on the front end with this data is affect the entire behavior of the application, because we could have a problem only on the front end and the backend could be fine. Uh, that could be because we are we have a misleading on the data management on the front end. Like we are performing a lot of cycles on that data. Like for example, if we draw a chart, and this chart perform a lot of calculation, maybe we are consuming a lot of resource on the front end. The front end is becoming the most important part of an application, because is the touch part for the user, is the application for the user, is the product for the user. The user doesn't know about the backend. It's perfectly normal. They only know the front end, and if the front end has a problem, the user will say, hey, the entire application has a problem. But maybe it's an issue with the data management, and or maybe could be an issue with the minification. The minification, an application that is not magnified or an uglify is lower than an application that is magnified by the size of the data that the network is returning.
Right. So I'll reiterate a few of the things that you just mentioned, and that what Juan Jose and Renee were getting at too. Some of the factors that go into the performance or that affect the performance of an environment. Machine speed, right? So you've got the machine that it's running on. Maybe it's got 2 gigs of RAM. Maybe it's got 20 gigs of RAM. Or maybe it's the processor speed. Maybe it only has 1 core. Maybe it's got 20 cores. Maybe those cores are 2 gigahertz fast, or maybe they're, I don't know what's out there now. I kind of lost touch with the hardware side of things, but maybe they're like this super fast Intel amazing chip, or maybe they're something that was made 10 years ago. Yes, they still exist. The network speed also, some of you all mentioned that. The usage, the bandwidth that you've been allowed on the server. And I'll mention something about that with Amazon or cloud services. You get what you pay for. For our development servers, we typically will use the free version or the micro version or the cheapest version because we don't want amazing performance on the dev side because we're not going to have a lot of users. QA they're okay with waiting an extra second for a search result, just so that so we're not spending thousands of dollars a month on development servers, which we're already paying lots and lots of money for servers. So anytime we can save money is great, but you really get what you pay for. So some of our clients they want the load balancers and they want the multiple redundancy in their servers. They want multiple databases with replication across databases. So you end up getting more performance because you end up paying more for the servers. If for some reason the software is super no, sorry, if the software is fast, it's nimble on the free version or on the dev server, it's probably going to be pretty amazing on the production server no matter what they use, except that when you start adding more users. But if for some reason it's slow on the dev server, then you might want to think about actually getting a heftier, fatter production server. The other things that Dante mentioned, database size, indexes, data management, things that the database can do to or for you, they can be big factors in performance in the different environments, and then also the developers' choices. The different choices that we make. We just finished maybe a year ago. We finished not a year ago, recently in the past year, in the past 12 months, we finished a project that was huge, heavily data-centric, and lots of data visualizations. And there were some performance problems at some points. We ended up making some changes to the code that at the time the developers thought that was a good idea, and it ended up being something that needed to be refactored later on. Architectural choices, code choices, you name it, all of those things can go into the performance. Now, local is almost always faster than all of the environments. Why is that?
The size of data, for example, because we are not on the local environment, we are not trying all the data sets. Right. Maybe the local is, we don't have a bottleneck on the network, for example. Yep. Doesn't matter if you return a large data set in a local environment, for example. That could be an improvement. In fact, that you execute an algorithm to zip your response to the front end, and that will lower your network latency.
Right. What about machine speed?
And we don't have traffic. We are the only ones on local environments.
Right. So yeah, it goes back to the network speed. What about machine speed? I've got 16 gigs of RAM in my computer.
Very, very good computers.
I mean, I've got 16 gigs. Even if you've got 4 gigs in your local machine, which you can't even buy a new computer anymore with less than 4. You might not even be able to buy a new computer with less than 8. So, what happens when you're talking about a cloud server though? You're looking at your checking account. You're the client. Imagine you're the client. You're looking at your checking account, how much money you're going to have to be spending every month. And they're telling you that for $500 a month, we'll give you a server with 2 gigs of RAM. Well, I mean, first of all, that's crazy. But, I mean, it gets your app into the wild.
1 gig hard drive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, the size of the hard drive is not going to matter too much, but the RAM, that can really, I mean, RAM can make or break your app. And like I just said, I've got 16 gigs of RAM. Well, I've got a virtual machine that I develop on. I put 8 gigs of RAM on it. So so I split the RAM down the middle. So on my development machine, I've only got 8 gigs of RAM. Well, that'd be worth $2,000 a month in cloud terms. So one big reason why a developer's machine is way faster than the dev environment is because the dev environment probably has half a gig of RAM, and your development machine has 4 gigs of RAM or 8 gigs of RAM. Orders of not magnitude, but like by major factors, your local machine is way faster. Think about this: most computers these days have 2 or 4 cores. A dev environment, if it's the cheapest thing on Amazon, is going to have 1, maybe. So you're already doubling your processor power by throwing more cores at your development environment. So, being able to having the luxury of being able to develop in a local machine is really a lot of fun. You don't have to wait on things. If you're waiting on things in your local machine, how's that going to perform in dev? It's going to be pretty horrible. So it kind of goes back to you get what you pay for. Local machines are always faster. Cloud machines for anyone are going to be slower until you pay for more. And then on-site, Renee has been bringing up on-site. That's the machine that is sitting in the client's office building. We have several clients that do that, partially because of security, maybe also because of just savings. They already have an IT staff. They don't mind paying for an on-site server. On-site server is going to be a lot faster for your for the client as they're accessing it on-site. Everything's going to be snappier. Databases on-site, your web servers on-site. Everything's going to be much faster because you're accessing it through a local network. You're not going across seas and across continents to get to the data. It's just right there in the same building. So okay, we're pretty much out of time. But any parting comments? Any last things that you all want to add before we say goodbye?
Nope, not me.
I'm okay.
Okay, Dante, any parting comments? I just saw that you got knocked off and came back on.
For me, as a previous manager of a data center, I prefer to use the web asset centers because if you are not the internet guy, the developers are not calling out your phone or your phone extension about why is not the server running.
Oh, come on.
You have a more happy life without being the guy managing the servers.
Tell that to the guy that lost his job because the company wanted to go with cloud servers instead of on-site.
That's me.
Well, now you're here with us, so you're in a better position anyway. Dante, any parting words?
You mentioned something about the GitHub process to daily delivery to production. They could perform that because they have a lot of tests of any kind of test to ensure the quality of the code the automatically. That is an important part. If
we lost him. I'll finish what he was going to say. If we have comprehensive testing over everything, then we can have enough confidence. I'm finishing what you were saying, Dante, because you got knocked off. If we can have comprehensive testing over everything, then we can have the kind of confidence that GitHub has to be able to deploy everything just as often as we want. Is that what you're going to say, Dante?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Cool. Well, I would love to have that kind of confidence someday. That is, I know it's coming. I know it's coming for us. I mean, Dennis here is already involved in leading our team in some ways, in actually helping to write having QA actually writing acceptance tests and executable acceptance tests. We're getting there. We're moving in that direction. Okay, so quick recap. Environments are great. They're necessary. We've got local, dev, staging, production. Local is where you actually create things. Dev is where all the developers of the product merge and integrate their software into one place, and QA tests. Staging is where the client tests and decides whether it's ready to go into production, and production is the real product. All right, that's it.
Yep, that's right.
Have a great afternoon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.